today we are very, very lucky to be joined by Kathy Betteridge, who is the Director of Anti-Trafficking and Modern Slavery for the Salvation Army, and Emilie Martin, who's the Director of Operations. So thank you so much for joining us. We're very happy to have you here because, as Jules reminded me, you guys have been there right from the start with our journey, and you also inspired us from the very beginning to join, to create the Anti-Slavery Collective. So through your guidance and knowledge and massive ability to support survivors, you were able to really guide us. So thank you for that.
6 years ago, we came to visit one of your safe houses and spent time with some survivors. And as Eugenie said, it's been an integral part of the Anti-Slavery Collective's DNA, and working with you for the last 6 years has really helped us stay on the right path.
So we have some questions for you. Could you just tell us a little bit about the Salvation Army and yourselves and your roles?
Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction, and very kind and generous introduction. It's just great to be here with you and to have the opportunity to talk and chat and just share, what we're doing and how it's impacting. So my role as the Director for Anti-Trafficking and Modern Slavery for the Salvation Army incorporates a number of areas. So I work with an international team who support colleagues and projects internationally. I work with our contract team, so they are the team that delivers the very specialist support that we give to survivors and potential victims of trafficking and modern slavery. And then I work with Emilie and the operations team who deliver that support through safe houses. And then we have an engagement team, a UK engagement team, who work with all our network of volunteers, our Salvation Army centres, our churches. We deliver, extensive support throughout UK. So that's sort of my role.
I repeat what Kathy says. I'm very grateful for the opportunity, and it's been a real pleasure working with you over the last 6 years. As Kathy indicated, I'm head of operations, so all the safe houses that the Salvation Army run across England and Wales come under my remit, and we provide support to females, males, family members who need accommodation and support during their road to recovery.
And how has COVID affected the work that you guys are doing? Are you still being able to get access to people who need your services and who need to come to a safe house? What are the different things that you've been noticing?
Well, I suppose really what was very striking in the very early days of the lockdown and when everything sort of really became apparent, the numbers of referrals that we had coming into our service reduced, which we kind of weren't anticipating initially. So there was a reduction in numbers, and that's probably because there were less people out and about to spot the signs really. So as a result of that, we needed to obviously continue to support our clients, and the government were very clear, and we're working very closely with them to allow and to encourage people to stay in the service. So we weren't asking our clients and anybody new who came in to move on and continue their survival journey. So we were able to keep people in our service, but that obviously then meant that we needed to develop further support and beds and accommodation. And we've been able to do that. So our supply chain have been very responsive, very flexible, and we've been able to open new safe houses. And we've also been able to secure beds, emergency beds in hotels, because we just did not know what sort of influx of people we would have. And also if one of our clients did contract the virus, and they were in a house, then that whole house would have to go into lockdown, even though there might have been beds available. So we needed to ensure that we had enough space and enough room for individuals as they came through. So initially the numbers were low, but what we've now begun to see is that the numbers have started to pick up again. And our 24/7 referral helpline is becoming more active again. So that again, the numbers of calls coming through dropped, but now that's increasing again. So I would probably say within the last week or two, we're beginning to see the numbers return to what they were in sort of February time. Not quite there yet, but definitely increasing. but we just wanted to ensure that our business was continuing as usual. Nothing was changing in that respect. The support was still there and is still there for individuals. But Emilie, I think you've also had experiences of that too.
We have, as Kathy says, for us it is very much business as usual. When you have vulnerable people who live in a safe house or in a house, we can't just say, actually there's a pandemic, we can't support you anymore. For us it carries on. We've just had to be very adaptable and flexible with how we deliver that support. And I've been very grateful that my team would normally be very flexible with how they provide assistance to victims, just because each case is very different. So during this pandemic, they've really come to fruition, and they've really blossomed in their imagination and how they go about providing support. So we do a lot more remote working where we can, but unfortunately not all individuals will cope well with remote working, so either over the phone or by Skype, but if not, we do have to go into safe houses and work from the safe houses. And as Kathy says, when we do have houses that go into lockdown, and we have had houses that have gone into lockdown, we've really seen a kind of a collective and a community within those houses to really support each other, as well as the staff. So we've really come together and come closer, despite all the difficulties in the pandemic. Obviously, as things ease and we're a little bit more aware as to how we can cope with this, it's got easier, but we still do have significant concerns about mental health issues, which are one of our biggest concerns, and it's just thinking outside the box. But as Kathy says, we have opened quite a significant number of safe houses, and again, it's just about thinking differently as to how we do that. So whereas before we would have got contractors to come in and support us, and builders to kind of come in and help, now where we can't get contractors because they've had to shut down, the volunteers and the Salvation Army community, for want of a better word, has really come in and stepped up, and has just come in and done the work for us. So where we have the need to move 40 beds, then we have volunteers who've just come together and said, that's fine, we'll do it, so that we can get these houses open as quickly as possible, so actually the victims who need them can get safe accommodation.
And how many people have you got in your safe houses at the moment?
So the Salvation Army has its own self-delivery service, but we work across a number of other charities across the United Kingdom. We wouldn't be able to do it on our own given the numbers, and Kathy will be able to say the exact numbers, but within our safe houses, we've got 91 victims currently across the United Kingdom, and we're looking to open a further 100 units for more victims to be accommodated.
So across the whole service, rather than sort of differentiating between safe house and then the outreach support we offer, currently we've got 4,300 plus in our service. So it's just over 4,300 that we are supporting in the service. And a number of those people have chosen to self-isolate because they're anxious, that they're really fearful that they may have or get the virus. So they've chosen just to self-isolate, regardless of whether they do have the virus. And that would come to about just over 1,000 at the moment, of that 4,000 that we have in our service. Gratefully and thankfully, we have had no deaths. We've had a number of probably about over 50, nearly 60 that have actually contracted the virus. But thankfully that's as far as it's gone.
Kathy, I recently came to with my husband to volunteer at one of the food banks, and I saw firsthand, the incredible work that you do separate to modern slavery. You have these food banks all across the UK where you're feeding, hundreds and hundreds of people, thousands maybe, but all for people who, really, really need it and need it. At the moment, because of COVID, they can't get access to what they normally have. So I'm sure there's been a rise in the amount of people who've been coming to food banks, but I'd love to hear a bit about that, but I'd also, we'd love to talk, because we heard that apparently people have been identifying victims of modern slavery when they came to the food banks. And I'd just love you to speak a bit about how you've seen that, how COVID has affected sort of all these things that you're working on. I know that must be such a tricky situation at the moment.
Sure. And we were so grateful for you and your husband to come and help. That was just great. And the volunteers who were there with you really appreciated the time that you spent, and the energy, and the just the whole sort of, you know, the fact that you wanted to do that was just great. So thank you for that. But yeah, I mean, it's unbelievable really that we are providing, there's 22 food hubs that we are providing food for. And what's really quite striking is that we're rolling out one of the biggest food distribution operations that has ever been seen in peacetime within the Salvation Army. So, you know, that in itself speaks volumes that we need this support for individuals. So we do have regular people coming, and what we discovered very early on, and it was identified because a group of men came to one of our food banks, or food food hubs, and they just started to talk with the volunteers and ask questions about, they were in a house, they weren't receiving any money. We began to pick up that they'd actually been working in a car wash business. Of course, that had stopped. So they weren't receiving their any money that they would have been given. They didn't have any food. They didn't know when they would have any money again. They also were very anxious about what would happen if they caught the virus. Where should they go, and what should they be looking out for? And they didn't really speak very good English. So some of the volunteers and some of the Salvation Army officers who were there sort of began to pick up those signs, and they contacted us and said, look, you know, we think this could be, these could be men who are involved in slavery. So we were able to immediately, notify the police, and the various channels of support were put into place. But what we also were able to do, with the Home Office is produce a leaflet so that we could, and we have, disseminated that widely so that people can know what to do, how they can spot the signs, and what they should do. So what we were asking people to do now is to look out for individuals who are, malnourished, who are anxious about their situation, who talk about the fact that they've got no food, who, maybe have some injuries on them still, because their slave masters will still be potentially mistreating them. If there's any concerns, then I would absolutely urge someone to contact the police initially. And if they can't, or if they want to put some further information, to contact our 24/7 referral helpline, because our referral team will also be able to give them information and guidance. But that was one incident, but we've had subsequent ones since then as well.
And what happens? So you would suggest that they talk to the police, but do you know further on from that what kind of help would they get? Or
yeah, so what will happen is when they've contacted the police will inevitably and potentially go and investigate that particular case, and they will then speak with the individuals, the clients, the men.
They you, Kathy, or do they include the Salvation Army when do the police keep you updated? Yeah.
Yes. So they will contact our referral line, and they will inform the line immediately that they've got a group of men here. So they will then start that process of support, and after the assessment of what the men or women need, they will then be brought into the service. And it could be that they're given safe house accommodation, or well, in that case it would be because they don't have anywhere to live, or if not, they might have outreach support. But that's when they would get the support from us, and they would be moved to a house, and then they would be given the support they are entitled to.
Fantastic.
And what, aside from reporting potentially suspicious activity or people who look like they're in need, what can our listeners do to support the Salvation Army, your work, and just the greater cause?
Well, obviously financially, we like any big charity are struggling to manage, and although we have finances, at the same time they are obviously being used up in lots of different ways. So we would encourage anybody, if they wanted to make a donation. So for example, we have our Victim Care Fund. So we have a number of people who very generously donate to the Victim Care Fund, and that goes specifically to help individuals who are within our service. And what we found during this time again, and Emily will be able to vouch for this, we've been able to support people through the Victim Care Fund by buying creative materials, art materials, anything that they can do to help keep them occupied and busy during this time. We've also been able to support individuals through the Victim Care Fund, women who are delivering and having babies. So we've been able to buy baby outfits and baby resources for the mums, because they're not able to get them from anywhere else because there's no shops open. Although they can buy online, it's not quite the same. And then as well, we've been, Emily mentioned about volunteers. So our volunteer support is just massive. And we really appreciate people who are able to do the shopping, to go and get prescriptions for people, to just support an individual, whether it's, through a telephone call or whatever, under the guidance of the support workers. So, there's lots of different ways that we would really value the public support.
I think I would probably add to what Kathy says, on top of the finances and on top of the volunteering, if there are individuals who can't volunteer and there are individuals who may not have the finances to donate, what I would say is talk about the subject. Because actually talking about it actually raises a lot of awareness. So you will have a lot of people out there who believe that slavery is something of the past. It's an 18th century problem. It doesn't happen anymore. But actually, when you have people who will sit either around a dinner table or kind of just over coffee and talking about modern slavery, it actually perks people in their interest, and they will then go on and they will talk to more people, and then they will talk to more people, and before you know it, you have this awareness that's being raised that actually modern slavery is very much something of today. It's very much growing in today's society, and actually because of that, people are becoming more vigilant. So they're noticing things more than they would have noticed if they hadn't known that slavery existed. And I think that's quite a powerful tool. So what I would suggest is, if people aren't able to donate, and if they don't have the time to volunteer, talk about it. Talk to anybody you can about this subject to raise that awareness and to make people realise that actually, when you go on your car wash and you see people who don't have the proper equipment, or who look malnourished, or who seem very tired, or who are sleeping in caravans, that's not normal, that's quite suspicious, and it may be slavery.
I think Jules and I, from the very beginning of all this, with your help as well when we met you, but is always about raising awareness. So if anyone listening today wants to get involved, please reach out to Salvation Army and get in touch with them.
So obviously this can be an incredibly grave topic to talk about, which it is. So Eugenie and I like to always ask our guest speakers for a story of hope to share with our listeners. So it'd be great to hear from either of you a little story of hope, either from the last 6 weeks or 6 years.
Yeah, I mean, I've got one I'd love to share with you, and I know Emily's got something that she would like to share. But yeah, we do hear some lovely stories despite this, difficult, topic, but also the situation we're in. And one of them just recently is about a woman who's from the Philippines, and she's receiving support from ourselves. And she was really anxious, and has been really anxious about her family back in the Philippines, and recognized that they were an older mother and father. They lived in a rural area, and she just didn't know what the situation was. So she was talking to one of our support workers about this, and the support worker contacted ourselves, and we were able to contact our Salvation Army colleagues in the Philippines, and the Salvation Army officers there were able to go to the family's home and take food parcels and support and resources for the family. And they took pictures as well. And with their permission, we were able to share those pictures with this lady back here in the UK. And, just knowing that her family, her mum and dad, were safe and they were being looked after, just gave her that sense of calmness and peace. And she was just buoyant. And they've continued to keep in touch. And it's just helped her so much because she knows they're okay. So that was so good. It was really great to hear that. But Emily, you share your story.
I mean, mine's obviously not as heartfelt. It's more of a practical kind of example. But Because of kind of lockdown, we have seen our houses very much become a community, and that includes a lot of my team. And I'm ever grateful to my team, because they will carry on despite the risks. They will still go into safe houses just because actually that's what's required of them, because they need to support those who are vulnerable. And we always say it's about them, it's not about us. But one of the things that this adversity has in fact created is great matrimonial bliss with one of my service managers that has had to go out and do some shopping for our residents. And as a result of that, his wife is ever so happy that he's now become a shopping legend, because he can go down Sainsbury aisles very quickly just to kind of get the shopping, get into the queue, pay, and out.
That's so good. That's so good.
Oh, well, thank you so much for taking part of our work from home conversations with the Anti-Slavery Collective. To all of our listeners, the work that the Salvation Army does is so, so important. They are the first port of care for survivors of human trafficking. If you want to help, you can either help with fundraising, volunteering, or as Emilie said, just talk about this as a problem, help raise awareness. I think the Salvation Army's sense of community is something that we can all learn from. So thank you for sharing with us today.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.